All right, welcome to our final panel, Whither the West. My name is Stanley Kurtz, and I'll be moderating today's proceedings. I'd like to begin by addressing a nasty stereotype that's been floating around out there to the effect that members of the National Association of Scholars are just a bunch of old guys sitting around moaning and groaning about the collapse of Western civilization. Well, today I promise you we are going to definitively confirm that stereotype. In fact, we hope to set a new standard. So let me first set the scene with a brief tour of the history of Western civilization classes in American higher education. And we can begin with what you might call Western Civ before Western Civ, and by that I mean the classics curriculum that dominated American higher education in the 18th and 19th centuries. We can take John Adams in his relationship with the great Roman orator and politician Cicero as emblematic of this period. John Adams very consciously sought to model his political life after the example of Cicero. After encountering Cicero's works at Harvard, Adams began a lifelong relationship of sorts with his ancient model and teacher. And this very much included Adams' role in America's founding, since his conception of what a proper constitution should be was in myriad ways drawn directly from Cicero. Now, that's not to say that Adams or the other founders slavishly followed their ancient models. On the contrary, the founders hoped to revive the ancient Roman experiment in republican government while avoiding what they saw as the weaknesses in ancient social life that had led to the Roman Republic's collapse in Cicero's day. And this stance emerged from a searching philosophical critique of the past. This issue of the influence of the Western past on the American founding, by the way, has been treated extensively by one of our panelists today, Paul Ray. And this background helps us to make sense of what the early 20th century reformers at universities like Harvard and Columbia were up to. Those creators of the original Western civilization courses were responding to the collapse of the classical curriculum and its replacement by a newly professionalized set of disciplines. The Western civilization course was an attempt to restore a sense of common purpose to the curriculum while also providing a foundation for intelligent citizenship. In a sense, it was an attempt to make possible again the kind of relationship that Adams had with Cicero. Now, these Western Civ classes, as we just saw in the video, were often required, and they were hugely popular for the most part with students. They served to anchor, really, the entire curriculum at American colleges for the first half of the 20th century. Now, when Western Civ courses began their steep decline in the 1960s, it was initially because all academic requirements had come under attack. More profoundly, however, students and faculty had increasingly lost faith in a once widely shared notion of history as the progress of liberty and reason, especially in the West. This loss of confidence is often attributed to factors like decolonization and immigration from third world countries, which in turn gave rise to a plurality of historical narratives, none receiving priority over another. In fact, however, the old Western master narrative seems to have been outright replaced by a rival post-colonial master narrative. This new post-colonial narrative favors not coexistence with the account of Western history as a progress of liberty and reason, but the discrediting and suppression of that account. Ibn Warraq, another one of today's panelists, is a leading critic of this new anti-Western post-colonial master narrative and a staunch defender of Western values. Now, in 1987, when Jesse Jackson so famously led Stanford students in chants of hey, hey, ho, ho, Western culture's got to go, our third panelist, Steve Balch, entered the picture by founding this august organization, the National Association of Scholars, in part in response to those protests at Stanford and, of course, more broadly, all that they stood for. Steve today is going to chronicle the decline of Western Civ classes since 1987 and point to some encouraging developments, at least we hope. But a couple of generations after the precipitous collapse of Western civilization courses in the 1960s, and a quarter century after the start of the campus culture wars and the founding of the National Association of Scholars, we need to take stock. Could an aspiring statesman today develop the same sort of relation to Cicero or even to John Adams that Adams had to Cicero in his own day? And as we heard a little earlier, maybe that's more possible in an airport bookstore than it is in a contemporary university. And what have we lost if that's no longer possible? Is Western civilization itself, like the course that describes its history, besieged but still kicking, or is it perhaps in terminal decline? That's what we're about to find out. All right, now for the more specific introductions, we have, of course, the one man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Steve Balch received his doctorate in political science from UC Berkeley. He taught for 13 years at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, CUNY. In 2007, Steve received the National Humanities Medal from President George W. Bush and received the Jeane Kirkpatrick Award for the defense of academic freedom in 2009. Since the fall of 2012, Steve's been serving as the founding director of the Institute for the Study of Western Civilization at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. Our next speaker, Ibn Warraq, studied Arabic and Persian at the University of Edinburgh. He has an honors degree in philosophy from the University of London. Now, I'm not going to read all of his many publications, but I particularly commend to your attention Ibn Warraq's 2007 book, Defending the West, a critique of Edward Said's Orientalism, a very powerful, important, influential critique of post-colonial theory, and the founder of that theory, Edward Said. Ibn Warraq's most recent book, Why the West is Best, A Muslim Apostate's Defense of Liberal Democracy, is going to give rise to some new and related thoughts that you'll hear in today's panel. Paul Ray, our third speaker, has the chair in Western Heritage at Hillsdale College, where he's a professor of history. Paul Ray studied at Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship. He has a doctorate in ancient Greek history from Yale. Again, he has many distinguished publications, but I would particularly single out for the attention of this audience his Republics Ancient and Modern, Classical Republicanism, and the American Revolution, which is really I think you could say his masterwork, and his most recent book, Soft Despotism, Democracy's Drift, has given rise to some further bold and, well, maybe controversial ideas that you'll be hearing in today's panel. Thank you very much.